Hi, everyone. This is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology, and today we're going to take a look at Mars's upcoming opposition with Pluto, which is happening over this weekend. Before I do that, we have just about a week left before my new class starts, Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic. You guys know I've been in promotion mode for about a month now, and I'm going to pop it up on the screen in case you haven't heard about it yet. You probably have if you watch my channel regularly. Check it out at nightlightastrology.com. Go to the courses page, click on the first year course. You can scroll down and learn everything about the program that you need to know. It's about 30 courses on the year, about 100 hours worth of content. We have an additional 12 guest lectures that come in. It is a very thorough and very well organized, well structured course in ancient Hellenistic astrology. And throughout the year, you can participate live in the webinars that I lead every week. Or you can participate remotely. Many people will watch the recordings because of time zone differences, or maybe they have to work or something like that. So you can follow along live or remotely. We have breakout study sessions after our modules, so that you can have tutoring help if you need it. You can ask questions year round. We have a discussion forum with staff there that are going to help you with all of your questions. So we try to provide as much, personalized attention as we can. There's also a lot of bonus material, homework, optional quizzes, reading assignments. It's a great program towards the end of the class. After we've studied the history, philosophy, all of the techniques and practices of ancient astrologers after that, we go into having live clients come into the classroom. And when they come in, I read for them, and then we sit and break down the sessions together, talk about them. You can ask all your questions, and I explain how and why I structured the reading in the way that I did. That's generally the best part about the program. People love that section of the program. So that's definitely a highlight of the course. If you end up liking this course, you can jump into my year 2 program, where we continue and start unpacking some of the more complex forecasting and prediction methods. I also have a horary class that starts in June. If you like horary astrology, should be doing a demo on horary tomorrow or maybe Monday. So yeah, lots of good stuff. You have just a few days left to save with the early bird rate. If you pay in full before the start of class, you can save $500 off. There's a payment plan, and there's also tuition assistance for those who are in need. So I hope to see some of you there. If you have any questions, feel free to email info@nightlightastrology.com. All right, so today we are going to take a look at Mars opposite Pluto. And there's a lot to say about this transit. It's a big one. It's one of the, easily one of the biggest transits of the month, if not the year. And it's going to affect everybody a little bit differently. So we're going to try to cover all of our bases today, and just really get into the archetypal dimensions of Mars and Pluto. So here you can see Mars in the sign of Cancer is currently moving through the opposition with Pluto in Capricorn. Now that is something that will play out. Let's see here. If I go just a couple of days, we're going to see it move through that 26th degree on Saturday, June 5th, and through Sunday, June 6th. So the 5th and the 6th are sort of the target dates, but you can feel it right now. You should have been able to feel it this week already, and you'll be feeling it really all the way until the new moon, which is on June 10th. That's a solar eclipse. So this Mars opposite Pluto comes in between eclipses, which makes it pretty potent in that regard as well. All right, so that's the gist of it. Mars will then enter Leo. Remember, Mars is in its fall in Cancer right now. We've talked a lot about the difficulties of Moon-Mars combinations, as well as some of the virtues of that placement. But what we're going to do today is further unpack this Mars-Pluto dynamic. And I'm going to talk a little bit about these by first reading a few entries from one of my favorite books, Cosmos and Psyche. You can see it right here. It's by Richard Tarnas. It is one of my most well-loved, well-used books. Fantastic book, kind of a modern archetypal psychology approach to astrology. Really fantastic. I'm going to also be taking us into a little bit of James Hillman today. I don't know if you guys know Hillman or not, but he was a student of Carl Jung and a very famous archetypal psychologist. Here's what Tarnas writes in his entry about Mars: the principle of energetic force, the impulse and capacity to assert, to act and move energetically and forcefully, to have an impact, to press forward and against, to defend and offend, to act with sharpness and ardor, the tendency to experience aggressiveness, anger, conflict, harm, violence, forceful physical energy, to be combative, competitive, courageous, vigorous, Ares, the god of war. So that is a really good, concise, but that's just packed. He has a way of being able to pack information about planets together. It's really unforgettable the way that he describes the planets. It has influenced my own use of astrological language, really. So let's talk about Pluto. Now, this is his summary of Pluto in Cosmos and Psyche. Pluto is associated with the principle of elemental power, depth, and intensity, with that which compels, empowers, and intensifies whatever it touches, sometimes to overwhelming and catastrophic extremes, with the primordial instincts, libidinal and aggressive, destructive and regenerative, volcanic and cathartic, eliminative, transformative, ever evolving, with the biological processes of birth, sex, and death, the cycle of death and rebirth with upheaval, breakdown, decay, and fertilization, violent purgatorial discharge of pent-up energies, purifying fire, situations of life and death extremes, power struggles, all that is titanic, potent, and massive. Pluto represents the underworld and underground in all senses, elemental, geological, instinctual, political, social, sexual, urban, criminal, mythological, and demonic. It is the dark, mysterious, taboo, and often terrifying reality that lurks beneath the surface of things, beneath the ego, societal conventions, and the veneer of civilization, beneath the surface of the earth that is periodically unleashed with destructive and transformative force. Pluto impels, burns, consumes, transfigures, resurrects. In mythic and religious terms, it is associated with all myths of descent and transformation, and with all deities of destruction and regeneration, death and rebirth: Dionysus, Hades, and Persephone, Pan, Medusa, Lilith, Inanna, Isis, and Osiris, the volcano goddess Pele, Quetzalcoatl, the serpent power, Kundalini, Shiva, Kali, Shakti. So I think what I like most about those descriptions is when you just juxtapose them, kind of set them side by side, and really hear how they sound together. If you don't feel, you should feel in your body that combination of Mars and Pluto after taking it in and listening to it right now. And excuse me, that is one of the main lessons that I've learned about astrology over the years, is to just repeat the basic archetypal qualities of the planets. So here are some of my own qualities that I wrote down to talk about as I contemplate. I mean, generally the way that I organize my talks for the day is I will often revisit some of my favorite descriptions of the planets and then sit with them and sort of, doodle out some notes in terms of what I'm feeling, what I'm noticing, and also, just imaginative associating, just free associating of the archetypes. And this kind of exercise, by the way, if you do it at home, really great for learning astrology. When you know an aspect is coming, make it a part of your meditation for the week. Literally take 5-10 minutes before bed and journal about, what your experiences were during the day. You don't necessarily need to link them to the planets, but if you just write them down and then revisit them and have kind of like at the top of the page which aspects are perfecting during the week, you're going to start noticing things. So anyway, just a side note. So one of the another text I don't have in front of me at the moment, but I really love, is The Archetypal Universe by Ren Butler. It's easily one of my most used desk references, and a fantastic, really fantastic account of the archetypal combinations of planets. One of the things that he writes is determined efforts toward renewal and regeneration. So if you think of Mars as willpower and you think of Pluto as that destructive but regenerative quality, then you're often talking about a combination that leads to this willing or forcing or pushing or this determined action toward rebirth. You're trying to pick yourself up off the ground. You're an underdog. You're feeling behind. You're feeling exhausted. You're feeling tired. But the heroic Mars needs to be reborn somehow. It's like, you know, I guess you could say it would be like an athlete who or a team that's down and counted out, and they muster the strength to come from behind and be reborn and to revitalize. It's when someone has to work really hard after an injury in order to come back from, like a torn Achilles or something like that. It's the will to regenerate after hardship. It's also, it can be about, trying to the Mars Pluto can also be a combination that will do anything at all costs to have some kind of breakthrough or to get what it desires, and that can lead to straining, tearing, harming, overpowering, kind of like a ruthlessness. So you have to be very careful of the Mars Pluto drive, because it is a resurrecting drive that, in one sense, is very positive and powerful, especially with Mars in its fall right now, but just about to leave its fall. The feeling of pushing through difficulties and recovering from some kind of period of hardship, but reaching a finish line that's been really hard to get to. That's a positive, right? But if you push too hard, you can strain or break something right now, a relationship. You can harm yourself by pushing too hard. I'm having to be careful with that in terms of like moving. We've got, it's just a lot of stuff to move around. And I just yesterday I caught myself. I almost fell down a few stairs because I was carrying something and was just, I was just in that mode where it was just kind of like you just get to that point when you're moving and you feel like you've been moving all day, and you get into Hulk mode, and then it's like, I'm going to break a toe. Like that's what happens next. So, just kind of be careful of that overexertion right now. I think that's something that could hit pretty hard over the weekend. But there's also the idea of passion and dynamism. So, there's nothing wrong with suddenly feeling like there's blood and muscle and strength and courage just coursing through you, and the need to act in a very strong way. With Mars in Cancer, sometimes it'll be a very instinctual or emotional way, the need to act or speak out from the emotional body or from a very vulnerable place. You also have to be careful about people who may trample on or harm those who are more vulnerable. For example, Mars Pluto is associated with rape because it's so forceful and sort of primal and ruthless. But Mars Pluto could also be associated with, breaking and entering into a home because of Mars being in Cancer. And I'm not trying to scare everyone, but just it's like I saw a meme yesterday actually that was very Mars Pluto. I don't remember where I saw it, but it showed a bear, like it wasn't a big bear, but it was a bear trying to crawl over and I think kill or take some puppies that were running around. And this mama dog was like, jumping and trying to get it away. And then this woman came tearing out of a house and literally just ran up to the bear and pushed it off the balcony ledge that it was climbing up on. And the whole post, I think someone might have even mentioned Mars in Cancer. I don't remember, but defensiveness, protectiveness, the mother bear instinct, primordial defense against the weak or the vulnerable, or the protecting the nest. Those kind of things come to mind. Also, death and rebirth, regeneration can come in the family. There can be almost like little nuclear bombs that go off in the family karma. You think about, kind of really going in deep into something and pushing through. You can also think about some very regenerating or what's the right word? Emotional breakthroughs related to sex or intimacy. You can think about also, so it's not just, the potential for violence, ruthlessness, or even rape, which can, especially with Mars and Cancer, can happen towards like women, children, the more vulnerable. But this is also about the emotional breakthrough in sex or intimacy that can come, an escalating or pent up energy that's boiling. It's the lid's on and it's just, it's just shaking, or the teapot, the tea kettle is screaming, and there's something that needs to burst. So even like, honestly, like even people having like, what are they called? Not cysts, like an infection that needs to be lanced, and drained. I know that's really gross, but that's very Mars Pluto. Um, if you are really forceful or aggressive with people trying to get things done, it'll often backfire. So you have to be careful of that. There was a good quote that Ren Butler had. He said, "Blood and thunder," and I thought that was a good one for Mars Pluto. And also, just in general, the idea of catharsis that's very intense. Now, how does this show up in the collective? Well, in the collective, you're going to see these themes make, in the headlines somehow. Probably over the next 3 to 4 days, there will be at least one major event that will unfortunately look just like the transit. And there already have been some. For example, there was a mass grave, I believe, discovered recently of, indigenous school children or something like that. I don't remember the details. Someone mentioned it to me as a heads up. This looks like Mars Pluto. There it is. There's this atrocity toward children, toward the weak, toward the innocent. Remember, again, it was several years ago that Mars was in Pluto. Mars was opposing Pluto in Cancer, and the whole Jeffrey Epstein scandal really exploded in the news. And that was with children again. So these are some of the things that are the darkest side of it right now. But one of the things that I love about Mars Pluto is that there's just emotional breakthroughs with Mars and Cancer, that places that need like pent up emotions that need to be released can be released. Let's just make sure we don't harm ourselves or others in the process. Let's just make sure it's not too forceful and reckless. I mean, Mars Pluto can be like that obnoxiously alpha male type of personality. And I'm not talking about just men. It can appear in anyone. Anyone can act like that, dominant, hungry, muscular, domineering type. So you do have to be careful of that one. Also, anything that it could be very mundane, the things that you're trying to get done in your life right now, and the feeling of some kind of breakthrough because you've finally achieved something that you've been working on. So those are all things to consider. Now, I want to read you a few things about, most of the time, I feel like it's good to know what's coming. It's good to know what kind of karmic weather is in the air, just because it's helpful. It's helpful for us to stay centered and to have healthy, participatory, conscious relationships with the gods. It's daily cosmic health. That's what astrology is helping us to do, right? If we're living our best lives, we're practicing spiritually, we're eating right, we're sleeping okay, we're just doing our best, whatever that looks like, but we're trying to do our best. This astrological weather just helps us to recognize what's going on. And when we do, we tend to make healthier choices. We tend to live in alignment with the flow of the universe, and we tend to understand and see the hand of the divine guiding us. We know what lessons we're supposed to be learning. We listen to our conscience a little bit more. That's why we do this. And we also learn it and study it so we can help other people with it. But why some people, it gets pretty existential, doesn't it? To sit and consider war, to sit and consider Mars, Pluto, like, why does it exist? And I think that we have understandably, there's an impulse to try to explain, rationalize, solve, or resolve the existence of especially Mars and Pluto, because they're so destructive, because they're such heavy archetypes to sit with. One of my favorite books of all time that taught me a lot about, still teaches me a lot about how to carry these archetypes, as does the study of Bhakti Yoga. This book is called A Terrible Love of War by James Hillman. You can see it right there. A Terrible Love of War. And it is really about the archetypal study of Venus and Mars, the two gods that are illicit lovers, They're always together, even though they shouldn't be. Venus, the goddess of beauty, love, harmony, friendship, peace, agreeableness, sensuality, comfort, all pleasant things. Mars, the god of war, strife, the god of conflict, the god of um, violence. Let's read a few things. Officially, memory is short. The evidence of atrocities desiccates in institutional archives. Yet war's inhumanity does not fade with time. It lingers, haunts. Can the dead be fully buried? Anthony Lloyd, a journalist, wrote, was trying to sleep, swinging in and out of half consciousness. Eventually, I must have drifted off. The dead child arrived in my room without warning, standing listlessly at the end of my bed, chopping me out of sleep with a single blow. He was silent, and I started upright. He stared into my eyes with an unwavering gaze that seemed like an accusation. Two small severed heads lay on the blood-covered table behind him. Severed heads on stockade poles, on tree stumps, scalps, skulls delivered by the sackful, the cartload, by victorious troops to their chief. Kali, with her necklace of heads, dancing on the funeral pier. Golgotha, place of skulls. The severed head as memento mori, warning of what war can do, does do. Long after the deeds are done, the gazing heads generate memories and replications, visiting similar sins upon unborn generations, much as the Bible says. Dreams bring back the dead. In the unconscious, nothing changes, said Freud. The souls in Hades are doomed to repetition. This is interesting. One of the reasons I like this passage so much is because death plays a very important role in memory. One of the reasons that we remember things over and over on an instinctual biological level, even evolutionary biologists and so forth would tell us this. We remember because we have to remember in order to survive. We have to remember what harmed us, what could have harmed us. So memory and trauma go together. There is a way in which memory and trauma, they haunt us. Trauma haunts us and plays a role in our memory, so that we might make appropriate choices. But we live in a we live in a very tentative world. We think we'll live forever, but it's very tentative. There's a quote from a book I was reading earlier this morning in the Bhakti tradition. It's called The Science of Self-Realization. And it was an interview that was being done, and someone said, this was actually quoted from a scripture. And so, like, what is the most amazing thing about human beings? And the answer was, well, that they walk around every day acting as though they'll live forever, completely unaware of the fact that, death is around any corner. Death could happen literally at any point in time. So remembering death, there's something, life is so closely tied to the memory of trauma and death. To live vitally, to live fully, to live deeply, to live intensely. I remember when I was a kid, I loved the movie Dead Poets Society. You guys probably have seen that movie before. Carpe diem, seize the day. But seize, well, why is that so compelling? To seize, to be seized. And this is what the gods do to us. They seize us. They're called grabbers or graspers or seize. They seize. And we live out, the archetypal powers of the gods in our lives all the time. Why do we study astrology? Because we're seized by these powers constantly. And it's much better to be in some kind of conscious relationship with that which is seizing us. So we have memory of what it feels like to be seized, of what kind of seizures of, cosmic ecstasy exist. So we have to remember these things, and they haunt us because the things that seize us are often, it's very Dionysian. They tear us apart, but they also bring us very close to the very life-giving power of existence. There's, of course, these are divine powers. So I like this, even though it's a dark quote. Severed heads on stockade poles, on tree stumps, scalps, skulls delivered by the sackful, the cartload, by victorious troops to their chief, Kali with her necklace of heads dancing on the funeral pier, Golgotha, place of skulls. The severed head is memento mori, warning of what war does do. Long after the deeds are done, the gazing heads generate memories and replications, visiting similar sins upon unborn generations, much as the Bible said, dreams bring back the dead. In the unconscious, nothing changes, said Freud. The souls in Hades are doomed to repetition. Now obviously he's being poetic, but we're talking about the life of the soul. The soul is an immortal, eternal being, according to ancient astrologers. So how do we not fall asleep in this garden thinking that we'll live forever in a body that will die? We need to seize the moment of this very fleeting and temporary life, and the moments are passing. So memory and trauma, memory and death, they're very important. They have to stay very close to the soul. This is why, many people, when they first hear about Buddhists, yogis, contemplative mystics of all different kinds of traditions, even pagan traditions, of course, they'll say, gosh, it seems kind of dark. It seems kind of heavy. And it's like, no, actually, it's about living, with a conscious awareness of death and its power, and living closely to it, because when you live closely to it, it puts you right in touch with what is also life-giving. They're so closely linked. They're separated sometimes just by the thinnest of margins. Let's read a little bit more. He has some great quotes, and there's so many. I mean, you could just read the whole book. This is one of my favorite pieces in his book. He says, since war's autonomy generates its own momentum, war has no cause other than itself. Is war something which really does have a life of its own? Asks Barbara Ehrenreich. War's inhumanity tells war's truth. Its origins lie outside the human sphere, beyond human control. We've been misled, she argues, pinning war onto persons, politics, economics, gender. It is the autonomy of war as an institution that we have to confront and explain. Her explanation is remarkably imaginative. She conceives war on the model of a living organism, a self-replicating pattern of behavior possessed of a dynamism not unlike that of a living thing. Suddenly, war emerges as a fictive figure, a robotic golem, a brutal, quote, a brutal giant stalking his human prey, as in these lines from Thomas Sackville and quoted by Michael Walzer. Lastly stood war in glittering arms clad, with visage grim, stern looks and blackly hued. In his right hand a naked sword he had, that to the hilts was all with blood imbrued. And in his left that kings and kingdoms rude, famine and fire he held, and therewithal he razed towns and threw down towers and all. We are entering the territory of myth and approaching the war god himself. Ehrenreich hesitates at that threshold, and he goes on to talk a little bit more about it. But so this is, it's really important, because there's this really interesting way of understanding war that ancient people had. You see it very similarly in the Puranas, in Bhakti, where the Leela of God, the divine play of God in creation, has to be understood in all phases and facets. And that's why there's all of these demigods that are like different faces of the divine, different autonomous powers of the divine. And war is one of them. We like to say, we can perceive in war so many different causes, so many different things to pin it on, or to blame it on. And it's not that that's wrong or bad, but if we lose touch of the fact that war is an autonomous force in nature, in divine reality, in the divine play of reality, then we can't ever have the right relationship to that God or to that archetype. if we don't allow it to be an autonomous function in the human psyche, if we don't allow it to have its own existence in the play of life itself. So I love this book because Hillman, he's not saying, look, war just exists, you can't do anything about it, so just sit on your hands. It's much like the Bhagavad Gita, another classic Gita bhakti text, where Arjuna finds himself on a battleground, and Krishna says yoga doesn't happen by pretending that these are just fleeting shadows on the cave wall that you can do nothing about, so just go off to a cave and meditate on higher truth. No, somehow yoga happens in and through the actual encounters of life, including those on the battlefield. And so, but it's very important that Krishna explains to Arjuna that this is destiny. What does destiny mean? It means that this is something that has to be. It has its own autonomous reality. It's not a contingency. It's the real thing. So I love this, drawing down the gods into the discussion of war helps account for why wars are mythical, not coherent despite all their hyper-rationality, not logical for all their reductions to structural oppositions, not human for all the analyses of their causes and human drives and errors. As Tolstoy said, none of these causes account for war. Over and above is some unnamed force, not unlike that of living beings. We call that in ancient astrology a god. Here's another one. Mars and Venus are always in the bed of the image. Even when the tale says they fly off and away from each other, they remain inseparable, an inseparable archetypal conjunction. Where Mars is, Venus will be. Love and beauty, seduction, glamour and pleasure, intimacy and softness shall accompany Mars wherever he goes. These camp followers belong to his battle train. The world of war's horror and fear is also a world of desire and attraction. We have come to another place where understanding our subject is again most baffled. War's beautiful horror, its terrible love, and exhilarating fusion we call sublime. Now, don't get it twisted, as the kids say. This is not a glorification of war. It's a recognition of its divine nature, of its archetypal autonomy, not that it is only happening if we do such and such things that are wrong. So in Krishna Lila, which is to say the pastimes of God, as they're described in the Bhagavad Purana, even in the spiritual world where let's just say archetypal tensions are resolved in love, there's a kind of perfection in this, in the sense of the enlightened spiritual dimension of life. These pastimes still go on. They're like they're like a divine sport, but they are experienced differently from the standpoint of a soul who is awakened to the nature of immortality, which is why Krishna says in the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna, he says, you're mourning for that which is not worthy of your grief. For all of these people on the battlefield, including you and me, we've lived many lives before. I can remember all of them. You can't. We're all eternal beings. Nothing can harm us, and we'll all live many more lives to come. How do we change our relationship with Mars when we start to perceive ourselves in life from that standpoint? That's the question I'm meditating on. I like to think of this. This is something that I say to myself pretty regularly. Especially when I am going to war and losing track of that eternal perspective. It's not bad to be compelled by action, force, to Mars, Pluto stuff. It's not bad. But if I lose that eternal perspective, that's when something goes wrong. It always goes wrong at that point. So I always remember this, that my most passionate, convicted ideas that I feel most strongly about, that I feel like pushing or fighting for, that they are still followed by my humanity. And these are the simple things that I keep in consideration. If I get into a Facebook fight with someone, which I don't anymore because I'm not on Facebook, thankfully. But let's say I get into some kind of heated debate, or I get in an argument with my wife, or I feel short with my kids, or let's say that I'm being hard on myself, or I'm impatient, or I'm feeling like I want to, ram something through that needs more patience, or if I'm feeling high on the, muscular strength of my own ideas, the force of my own convictions, my righteousness, whatever, I have to remember these things. There's a good chance on any given night of the week after feeling so strongly about something that I will have trouble sleeping, that I may experience indigestion at some point this week, that any of my relationships could be troubled, that I could end up feeling like a failure even after feeling so strong, intense, passionate, right about something, and that someday I'm going to die. So I just remember that they can help you to be forgiving of other people too. Like, even I don't want to encourage people to walk around judging people, but like, you know, if if you run into someone and they're like just on the warpath about something, or they're just so, over the top, they're just in battle mode. They're on a horse about something. You can be like, yeah, they'll probably have trouble sleeping tonight. They probably get less sleep than they need. They probably look in the mirror and fiddle around with things on their face. um you know and there's probably, a wrinkle or stretch mark somewhere on their body, and they could very well have trouble processing broccoli if they eat it. I'm not kidding. If you do simple, like, even like Buddhists will tell you, there's many meditations that are actually very helpful like this. Not to not trying to diminish other people's beauty or relevance or divinity. It's just like, it can help to not take ourselves so seriously if you just remember, like, I'm a sack of skin and bones, and whatever my ideas are, like, there's a good chance that I'll like sleep weird on my hip tonight. So anyway, how do you guys keep yourself honest? I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear about your Mars Pluto experiences over the next 3 or 4 days. If you see a relevant story in the news, leave a comment on this post so we can all learn from it. Again, just to plug my upcoming course, the new course starts on the 13th. If there's any reason to study astrology specifically, it's because if you're in touch with these archetypes and they become autonomous forces, A, you get to develop an actual relationship with them, and B, you have a skill set for the rest of your life that a lot of people don't have. When I walk around the world, one of the things that helps me to have a lot of compassion for human beings and myself is recognizing how much we are lived by these archetypal forces and powers, and that they're autonomous. There's no cause for them. We don't have to always go seeking for how we got things wrong. It's that would be like saying, well, how did this gigantic wave sweep me along? How did I get things so wrong? Well, it's bigger than you, dude. And astrology helps us with that, and it helps us to help other people with that. And God, does it feel good to take that pressure off. So come study some astrology if you're into it. The class starts on the 13th. Check it out on my website, nightlightastrology.com. I hope you guys are having a good week. We'll have one more video tomorrow before the end of the week, and should be a little bit more on, we're going to do some chart work and a few other things. Okay, that's what I've got. Take it easy, everyone. Bye.